All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Willcox AMA. We are here today to talk a little bit about background of what an AMA is, provide some information, and also to talk about a management goal for this active management area. My name is Natalie Mast. I'm the Active Management Areas Director. My responsibility includes all of the active management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas across the state. I've got a number of additional staff here with me today. We've got Lucas Bennett down at the end, who is our Deputy Counsel, Doug McCachran over here, who is in our Public Information Office. Erin Stolley is at the back table. Thank you, Erin, for being here. Erin is a part of our field services team. And Dennis Troutman in the black here is our outreach coordinator. Madison Moreno is our establishment coordinator. And Casey Allman is our establishment team supervisor. I wanted to make sure to introduce all these folks to you because particularly Casey and Madison and Dennis are going to be the folks that you see down here for every single meeting. These are your first line of contact, the folks that are going to be developing expertise in these regulations and helping you all as you learn what these regulations mean for this area and helping you through the process of applications for grandfathered rights and helping develop some of the conservation requirements that go along with the management plans and these requirements. I hope the fact that we have folks here today, that we've come down here, is a show of how important it is to us to be hearing from you all. My history at the department is that I started back in 2016 working on the Cochise planning area, holding meetings in this building in 2016 and 2017. This is an area that I've been learning about for a long time, but even in all those years, I know that I'm never going to be able to know this area the way that you all do. And so we're really here to hear from you all and learn from you all and get input from you all as we work together to develop some of these conservation requirements and develop a management goal and work through this process of establishing this AMA. So with that, we'll do a little bit of logistics and I will hand it off to Casey and Madison to walk through some background information. Dennis, if you could go to the next slide, please. All right, so I mentioned a little bit of what we'll be covering today. Casey will be providing an overview of, Casey and Madison, excuse me, will be providing an overview of what an AMA is, some of the requirements that are included in an AMA, and we'll begin a discussion of the management goal for the Willcox AMA. What I want to say about that management goal from the outset is that this is a start. And we're here today to hear additional input from you all, hear ideas from you all, and we'll have additional meetings after today to continue developing that proposed management goal. We will have time for additional discussion and Q&A at the end, so we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for that. I will say that we do, go back one. Thank you, Dennis. We are providing today's presentation for informational purposes. There is a lot of detail that goes into an active management area, and ADWR as a state agency is not able to provide legal advice for folks. So we want to be making sure that we are being really clear about that this is not intended as legal advice. And if you have specific questions about your specific circumstances, you should consult with an attorney on those questions. Next. Thank you. I did mention already that we have time for Q&A at the end. We do ask that folks remain respectful. We understand that this is a difficult issue, that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of learning and a lot of additional information that you all are going to have to absorb. And we're going to do our best to work through that with you all. It's going to take some time, but I want to make sure that we're being able to be respectful and get that information across as well as we can. We do also have a webinar portion of this meeting today. So we will ask folks with questions and comments to come up to the podium and speak into the microphone so that our participants on the webinar are able to hear. We do have this room reserved until 6 p.m. So as we're working through those questions and comments, we may ask folks to limit that time on those questions and comments as we work through those. And with that, oh, one last thing before I move on, we have an absolutely enormous amount of information available on our website. There is a lot of information available out to you all, available out there to you all on our website through these types of meetings. We hope through these meetings to be unpacking some of that information, but for those of you who would like some additional detail or technical information or that type of thing, additional references, there is an enormous amount of that available on our website. This presentation with all of these links will be posted on our website probably tomorrow or so. Thanks. Yes, Dennis is nodding at me. So we will have these presentations posted to our website very promptly after these meetings. So with that, I will go ahead and hand things off to Casey and Madison for some background information. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Natalie mentioned, my name is Casey Allman. I'm the AMA Establishment Supervisor. You'll be seeing a lot of my face and my team's faces down here while we get to know y'all and help you through this complex new AMA. So, Dennis, thank you. First, I wanted to go over some general background information about AMAs, talk to you a bit about the different application types that are available to you, as well as some nuances like wells and things like that. So starting off with the Groundwater Management Act of 1980, that's what formed the Arizona Department of Water Resources. It created new regulations statewide for the use of groundwater. Most of those regulations are within AMAs or active management areas and INAs, irrigation non-expansion areas. It also created the first AMAs and INAs in the state and authorizes the establishment of new AMAs and INAs by director designation. Next slide, please. This is a general regulatory structure, and it kind of starts at the statewide level. So no matter what, even if you're not in an AMA or an INA, there's some things that folks have to comply with, like registration of all wells, proof of an adequate water supply and community water systems. And then from there, the regulations kind of build on each other. So an INA is kind of a middle step. It stops the expansion of irrigated acres. So those are prohibited once an INA is created. And it also creates rules for measuring and reporting of water use. And then after that, there's an AMA. So the AMA encompasses all of those things that I mentioned. It also includes assured water supply, management goals, plans, and conservation programs, grandfathered rights and withdrawal permits, and then things like lake bills, transportation, well spacing, and other small nuances as well. This slide here just kind of shows you all the different AMAs and INAs throughout the state. There are 7 AMAs, including the newly designated Willcox AMA, and 3 INAs as well. Next slide, please. This is the map of the new Willcox AMA. It's the first subsequent AMA to be established by director decision, and it was established on January 8th, 2025. It is located in both Cochise and Graham County, and Cochise County is a little different than Graham. It has mandatory adequacy as well. That'll be explained a little bit later. All right. So what is an active management area? Next slide. Thank you. So there's a few definitions that are important to know with an AMA. A big one is the definition of irrigation. So irrigation, from our perspective, is the application of water to 2 or more acres to grow plants or parts of plants for sale or human consumption. So it's if you're growing like a small little bed of flowers in front of your house, that's not technically considered irrigation. It's 2 or more acres that are going to be something that you would want to apply for a right for. Grandfathered rights, they allow for the withdrawal and use of groundwater based on lawful withdrawals in the last 5 years from the date in which we initiated the procedures for this AMA establishment, which was October 23rd, 2024. We have exempt wells and non-exempt wells, which I'll get into in a lot more detail in a future slide here. And then something also to know is what an acre foot is. That's what all of the measurements are done with annual reports and such. And it equals out to be 325,851 gallons of water in 1 acre foot. All right, so prohibition on expansion of irrigated acres. What that means is once the proceedings to consider establishing the AMA were initiated on October 23rd, there was a prohibition put in place on the irrigation of any acres not legally irrigated within the 5 years preceding that date. So that 5-year time period is going to be October 23rd, 2019 to October 23rd, 2024. Because the AMA was established, that prohibition now remains in effect permanently. In addition, that time frame comes into play with grandfather rights applications. So you'll be seeing that date a lot. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to go over some characteristics in initial AMAs and then subsequent AMAs. So the initial AMAs were established with the Groundwater Management Act in 1980. A lot of the same things here. So prohibition on expansion of irrigated acres, metering, reporting. There are withdrawal fees in initial AMAs, management goal, management plans, things like of that nature. Next slide, please. In a subsequent AMA, all of these characteristics are basically the same, except that withdrawal fees aren't permitted in subsequent AMAs. So that's not something that has to be worried about. And then the management goal is something that we actually get to craft with you. So in those initial AMAs, that was put into the code and is part of statute there, but we're able to come here and learn from you and work with you and tailor a management goal that really works for this basin. Next slide, please. All right, so who is allowed to use groundwater? This is a big slide here. I will try to break it down for you. If you have a well with a maximum pump capacity of 35 gallons per minute or less, that's considered an exempt well, and you can generally withdraw water or groundwater without having a right or permit. Non-exempt wells are wells with a maximum pump capacity of 35 gallons per minute or greater. So you may withdraw groundwater from these wells only if the person holds a right or permit to withdraw that groundwater. Any person irrigating 2 or more acres or using 10 or more acre feet for any non-irrigation use must file an application for a grandfathered right or obtain a withdrawal authority. April 8th, 2026 is the deadline for applications. If you do not apply, it will result in the waiver and relinquishment of any right to use groundwater for those purposes. You're going to be seeing this deadline across a lot of our slides here today. Very important deadline. Next slide, please. This slide here, just a good overview of what an exempt well is and what a non-exempt well is, kind of what I just talked about. So the pump capacity limits are really important with this kind of thing. Slide. All right, so as far as well spacing requirements for non-exempt wells in AMAs, new non-exempt wells will need to have a well impact analysis done. It won't be approved for drilling if the proposed well would cause any kind of damage to the surrounding area or affect the water quality, anything like that. More info about that can be found on our website. And like Natalie said, this presentation will be posted online tomorrow. It has a link in it. And we also have a great wells department and our departments and AMA department that'll be happy to help you if you just give us a call or send us an email. Next slide, please. Thanks. In an AMA, just like in INA, measuring and reporting is required if you have a grandfather, right? Persons withdrawing groundwater from a non-exempt well are required to measure withdrawals with a measuring device and or method approved by ADWR. An approved measuring device must be installed on all non-exempt wells by March 31st of this year, with the first annual report of water usage due on March 31st of 2026. After that, they're due yearly on March 31st as well, so same date every year. If you have an exempt well, 35 gallons or less for a non-irrigation use, you're generally not required to measure and report groundwater withdrawals. Next slide. So the Willcox AMA was established formally on January 8th, 2025. Again, just kind of reiterating some things because they're so important. In subsequent AMAs, only lands that have been irrigated within the 5-year time frame of October 23rd, 2019 to October 23rd, 2024 can be legally irrigated. Acres that weren't irrigated in that time frame may also be considered irrigated if substantial capital investment has been made to the lands in that same time frame. And the next slide has some more information about SCI. So SCI is a very fact-specific determination. ADWR can't make specific recommendations for individual circumstances. But if you're a property owner and you believe that you've invested into your property to bring it into irrigation within the last 5 years, you're more than welcome to submit a grandfather right application with the SCI attachment included with that. Again, it's the same time period of October 23rd, 2019 to October 23rd, 2024. Next slide, please. All right, so there's a few different types of grandfather rights that you can apply for. And again, you can see on this slide in big red deadline, April 8th, 2026. The main one that we see people applying for is just a normal irrigation grandfather right. It allows the holder to irrigate acres of land that were irrigated in the 5 years preceding the notice of the initiation of the designation procedures. This type of right is also tied specifically to that plot of land, so it can't be moved to another plot of land in the basin. There are also type 1 non-irrigation grandfathered rights. They're created from the permanent retirement of an IGFR and may be used for non-irrigation purposes. There's a maximum of 3 acre-feet per acre, but maybe less. And then there is a type 2 non-irrigation grandfathered right that can be used for non-irrigation purposes based on non-irrigation pumping in the 5 years preceding the notice of initiation of designation procedures. A type 2 is flexible. It may be sold separately from the land. It may not be divided, but a portion may be leased and it may be used anywhere within the Willcox AMA. Next slide. All right, this is just another slide to reiterate that deadline for the application. So April 8th, 2026, very important. Put it in your calendars. We are here to help you. We're going to be down here multiple times in the coming year to have application workshops and kind of help to walk you through the application, answer any questions you may have. Have a great team for that. So we look forward to being down here for more of that and helping you folks out. All right, a little bit about groundwater withdrawal permits because I mentioned having a grandfather right or a withdrawal permit. So some examples here of withdrawal permits would be like hydrologic testing permits, poor quality groundwater permits, temporary electrical energy generation permits, mineral extraction permits, draining and dewatering permits, and general industrial use permits. So there's some options there as well. A little bit about service area rights. A service area right is the right of a city, town, or private water provider or company or irrigation district to withdraw groundwater for delivery to customers within its service area. And this right expands as the service area expands. There are also applications for that online. Talking a bit about adequate water supply versus assured water supply, Cochise and Graham counties are broadly subject to the adequate water supply program. The Willcox AMA is now subject to the assured water supply program. Outside AMAs, a developer of a proposed subdivision must obtain from ADWR a report on the adequacy of the water supply for 100 years. Cochise County has adopted its own ordinance requiring an adequate water supply in order to get plat approval. This is referred to as mandatory adequacy. Outside AMAs, groundwater is physically available only if it is available above 1,200 feet below the land's surface. Next slide. As far as assured water supply goes, Willcox AMA is now subject to assured water supply, now that it's an AMA. Requirements applicable to both assured and adequate water supply are physical, legal, and continuous availability for 100 years, financial capability, and water quality as well. Additional requirements only applicable to assured water supply would be consistency with the management plan and with the management goal. Speaking about the management plan, I'm going to pass it over to Madison Moreno, our AMA Establishment Coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. My name is Madison Moreno. I am the AMA Establishments Coordinator. I'm really glad to see all of you here today. I will be going over a little bit of background about the management plan and going over the management goal. First, can you hear me? There we go. We needed to turn it up. Again, my name is Madison Moreno. I am the AMA Establishments Coordinator. Thank you all for being here today. I am going to be going over the management plan background and the management goal section of the presentation. So first off, what is a management plan? Management plans are written for each management area and are used as a regulatory tool to reflect the evolution of the Groundwater Management Act. Next slide, please. So management plans for the initial AMAs. The main overarching goal for management plans are that they're designed to achieve reductions in withdrawals of groundwater. That's the biggest point that we're trying to get across, is that we're designing these plans to achieve reductions in withdrawals of groundwater. Statute for the initial AMAs kind of outlines these plans to have conservation programs that are a little more structured for the initial AMAs, where we don't really have a lot of leniency to create new programs. We have some leniency to adapt and create new programs, but not a whole lot. Next slide, please. For subsequent AMAs, a little different. This is a pretty big slide, but the biggest chunk that we want to focus on here is that we want to include that we are following as closely as practical to the program set forth in the sections of the initial management plans. That means that we have flexibility of creating programs that work for you all. These programs that we can create brand new and are flexible to today, to what is adaptable and progressive for what is working in today's world, not something that we created in 1980 in statute. Next slide, please. Yeah. This next slide shows the conservation programs that we have in the initial AMAs. Again, statute is that we want to achieve reductions in withdrawals of groundwater. The core, I like to call it the meat part of the management plan, is the agricultural, municipal, and industrial sections of the management plan. So we have the base program, the historic cropping program, the best management practices program, and the integrated program. The base program is required by statute. which is water duties and allotments, which is what most people are accustomed to when we hear this. The historic cropping program, which no one has ever opted into and is required by statute in the initial AMAs to have in the management plan. The best management practices program came in statute later on, was not involved in the first management plan. And the integrated farm program is not in statute, but was created later on in the fifth management plans. The municipal chapters, the GPCD program, and the GPCD program, excuse me, is a gallons per capita per day calculation that we use as a metric for municipal providers. And the non per capita per day program is a best management practices program. The industrial chapter, we have general requirements, and we also have specific subsector programs like turf for golf courses and feedlots and dairies. These conservation programs include regulatory requirements related to water use, reporting requirements for annual reporting, conservation targets, flexibility provisions, and compliance. Next slide, please. I wanted to cover the conservation programs that we created for the Douglas AMA, for the first subsequent AMA. We had the ability to create new conservation programs that had never been seen in the initial AMAs before. So for the agricultural conservation programs, we kept the base program, which is allotments. However, we were able to create a tiered system that was not seen in the initial AMAs for irrigation efficiencies based off of acreage. So based off of a certain farm size, we were able to adjust irrigation efficiency percentages, which is we know not in reality of what it actually is. It's more used as a regulatory tool to be used in a calculation. That was seen different than the initial AMAs, and we were able to be flexible with that in the development of the plan. We were also able to include the integrated farm program, which was not something that was included in the first management plans across the initial AMAs. For the municipal program, we created a brand new program called the Integrated Water Resource Plan, which is a scenario planning program where we're looking at demand and how is that supply going to grow with raising demand, and where is it going to come from? With that, we got rid of those two programs that exist in the initial AMAs. It doesn't work for what worked for Douglas. So we worked with the stakeholders down there and were able to figure something new. For the industrial sector, we were able to kind of adjust and create conservation plans for all programs across the board. But a lot of the things kind of stayed the same, with regulatory requirements and reporting requirements staying across the board, conservation targets and flexibility provisions staying, and compliance provisions. Again, I'd like to reiterate that we're here to develop and adapt new programs that we want to tailor to the Willcox Basin. And we want to create those programs for the meat of the plan, agricultural, municipal, and industrial. Slide, please. Here are some important dates, just to remind ourselves and kind of going in the flow of the progress of how the plan will flow. So, reminder that the 5-year eligibility period for grandfather right applications is October 23rd, 2019 through October 23rd, 2024. The establishment of the AMA is on January 8th, 2025, which is important to remember because the 15-month period of applications, which puts the deadline for grandfathered right applications at April 8th, 2026. Again, if you do not submit your application by April 8th, 2026, you waive and relinquish your right to use groundwater. By January 8th, 2027, that is the estimated adoption of the Willcox AMA First Management Plan. 2 years after the estimated adoption, 2 years after the adoption of the plan, is the estimated effective date of the conservation requirements of the first management plan. It's a long process, but we're here to work through it. We're here to help you through it, and we're here along for the ride. We're here for anything that you need during the application process, during the management plan process. We want to work with you and make this process as smooth as possible. It's going to be a long time. That 2029 is as far away as we think, but we want to make this process as easy as we can. So next slide, please. Oh. All right. I will now be going into a little bit more background about the management goal for the initial AMAs and subsequent AMAs. All right, management goals for the initial AMAs. Again, as Casey mentioned earlier, were created with the Groundwater Management Act in 1980 and are written in statute. The Prescott, Phoenix, and Tucson AMAs are safe yield by 2025, which means that we are putting as much water back into the aquifer as we're pulling out. We did miss that target of 2025. However, we're working towards meeting that target continuously and maintaining the goal of safe yield. Just because we missed that target doesn't mean that's still not a goal to continue on. The PNOW goal is to allow the development of non-irrigation uses and to preserve existing agricultural economies in the AMA for as long as feasible, consistent with the necessity to preserve future water supplies for non-irrigation uses. Santa Cruz is also safe yield to maintain safe yield conditions in the AMA and to prevent local water tables from experiencing long-term declines. The Douglas AMA goal, we were able to collaborate with stakeholders down in the Douglas Basin and create that goal with them by creating a timeline and what works best for them. The goal of the Douglas AMA is to support the general economy and welfare of the water users in the basin by reducing the rate of aquifer depletion by an amount established in the first management plan and by additional reductions established in each subsequent management plan every 10 years thereafter. That amount established in the management plan is 640 acre feet annually for a total of 6,400 acre feet over the 10-year period. Reminder, today's meeting is just the beginning process of developing the goal. We are here to collaborate. We want to have a discussion. We want to, this is just a first step. We want to have multiple discussions. We want to have more meetings. We want to make this this goal work for everybody and make it as adaptable as possible. So we will be taking additional comments after today's meeting. So you can submit your any written comments to management plans email. It is at managementplans@azwater.gov. And the deadline to submit those written comments is January 31st. I'm going to go over a little bit of the framework of how we developed a management goal template. So we have three components. It's the goal, objective, and a timeline. So the goal is generally broad, it's long term, and it's really the desired outcome. All of us have these long term goals that we all want to achieve. The objective, it's specific. It has to be measurable. We have to figure out how we're going to see that goal be achieved. And a timeline. When? When are we going to achieve it? It's all like our New Year's resolutions. By when? When are we going to see those results? So the basic principles of the goal is that we need to move the AMA towards long-term water sustainability. It could either be with criteria moving water resource management, decrease outflows and increase inflows, with increased recharge, things like that, reduce withdrawals of groundwater. It should be measurable and contain an evaluation criteria. And it must provide a timeline in which to achieve that goal. And it must be achievable. We must, keep it in the ballpark. And it must be legal and reasonable and defensible. We want to be at least reasonable in our goal and be attainable at some capacity. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of initial ideas for the goal, objective, and timeline that we have. So some examples could be and extend the life of the aquifer by reducing overdraft by a certain percentage in each management period, through the reduction of withdrawals of groundwater by each water use sector, and through increasing the rate of recharge, to encourage economic growth while also reducing rate of aquifer depletion and subsidence, preserve a sustainable supply of groundwater while fostering economic growth, and to reduce the effects of subsidence and fissures within the AMA. Some ideas for timeline is to stabilize within 10 years and achieve reductions each year thereafter until X year or however long, within 30 years of the first effective conservation requirements, over the first management period and subsequent periods thereafter. Next slide. Reminder, this is just a draft. We are here to discuss this. This is a proposal. This is something that we came up with to talk about. So the Willcox AMA management goal is to support the economic growth, reduce the future rate of subsidence, and extend the life of the aquifer by reducing the groundwater overdraft in the basin by as much as feasible in the first 15-year management period and in each 10-year management period thereafter. This is something that we want to discuss with you all today, talk about, think about, sleep on even, and submit those comments to us later if you want. This is what we're here to talk about. I'll go back to that for a little bit. Sorry. Thank you. We will now be opening up to the discussion portion of the meeting so that we have time for comments and questions. Go to the next slide now. I want to make sure that before we get started, I want to just reiterate that if you have any specific questions about your individual circumstances, you can address them either after the meeting to us or you can call the customer service line or email us. Our cards are at the front. Please be respectful again to staff and to fellow attendees. We want to make sure that we're all being cordial in the meeting. And please speak into the microphone so that everyone who is participating virtually can hear us. And today's meeting will end at 6 because we only have the room until then. And we are requesting that we are limiting everyone to 2 minutes. So we will let you know when you have run out of time, and we could cut the mic. So just letting you know. If you have a desire to speak, we do say that you please line up in the middle row, and we'll go from there. And please state your name before doing so. Thank you. Yes, we can pull up the draft slide.
I'm John Howard, Graham County. John Howard, there we go. John Howard, Graham County Supervisor. I have an interest in this because I am a supervisor in Graham County. I have a couple questions on my first question is, how many acre feet are you going to allow an individual to draw, or are you doing this process by the entire district? Is it going to be acre feet for the entire district? Will there be a limit or a cutoff on that?
So as far as irrigation grandfather rights and them being granted, it's based on the historical usage over that 5-year time period. So in terms of acreage, it's that maximum amount of acres that they can prove that they have irrigated in that 5-year time frame.
So it's the individual, basically.
It is on an individual basis based on folks that apply for a grandfathered right
Mm-hmm.
and who are approved for that grandfathered right. As Casey mentioned earlier, there are 3 different types of grandfathered rights. One that's an irrigation grandfathered right, and then 2 different types of non-irrigation grandfathered rights. Mm-hmm. So depending on the specific type of right they're applying for, they might be under a non-irrigation grandfathered right, might be an application might be approved for the volume of water that they were using in the 5-year historic period.
Okay.
For an irrigation grandfathered right, it's based on acreage. And then as the management plan is developed, there's a calculation that goes to developing an allotment for that acreage and a total volume for that acreage.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, I'm sure most of the producers and growers in this in the Willcox Basin and Graham County as well, they probably already have metering devices on their well and know what they're doing. Those that don't have the meter on their wells that aren't exempt, is that cost going to be passed on to them as an individual to pay for them, or does the state pay for that metering process?
The state does not currently have any funding available to.
So it'll be upon the individual, because in Graham County, I'm a past farmer. I had to put meters on 16 wells, and on them 16 wells, one of them cost $8,000 for doing it where it be in compliance, but most of them averaged about $1,500 for that meter to work. And then somebody had to be hired to read that meter and make sure we was all in compliance. So that's just another fee that will be passed on to these folks that they're probably not aware of. So I'm just throwing that out there. Then my final question is, in the past, I had a constituent, well, he's not my constituent, he's from Willcox. He asked me a question about, he bought land here several years ago and as an investment, and it was appraised, and the loan and all that was based on a couple $1 million. He has a well on that for 700 gallons a minute. hasn't been used. So now he's got a loan out and he's got to pay that loan. But with this AMA, he will not be able to be grandfathered in. So his investment is done. So that is just something that needs to be realized. People, a lot of this land over here isn't developed yet, and they wanted to develop it, and now we have this problem that folks that have the note out there, they cannot pay their note with this coming down, or it will be a problem for them. So that's all I have to say. I was just wondering about the meters and the amount of acre feet you was going to allow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Mhm.
I'm Jim Applegate. I'd like to hear the response to the question about reimbursement of costs again. I couldn't make out what she was saying. Am I going to get reimbursed for putting in a flow meter?
No, currently the department doesn't have any kind of reimbursement program.
That's what I expected. But I thought I heard something about a slush fund somewhere. Further, I have been trying, I got until, 31st of March to get a flow meter on my wells?
Yes, sir.
Where can I find a list of what is an approved flow meter?
This presentation that we're doing today is going to be posted on our website, and it has a link that will give you all the approved measuring devices. You're also welcome to call our wells department, who can definitely walk you through your options there as well.
Now, I talked to my well man today, and I may be down the list and not make the 31st of March. Am I going to get fined for that?
So our intention is not to be going after people harshly in terms of installing these meters. It is a requirement that folks install those meters. But we understand that there are logistical challenges to getting those installed. I would encourage you to communicate that with us as you're doing today. We can work to consider extensions in specific circumstances and things like that. The important thing about those meters is that what we're going to be looking for come March 31st, 2026, is a measured water use for each non-exempt well. So whether that's from a totalizer style meter or some other type of approved measuring device, we are going to be looking for water use measurements with the 2025 calendar year annual reports that will be submitted in 2026.
I've looked at those reporting requirements, and beyond, you're asking for a lot more besides what I'm flowing. I mean, my electric bills, I can't give you some other examples, but the list goes on and on and on. And I'm not a secretary or anything to put it all together.
So if I could clarify there are multiple options for meter types. You are able to select from that list of options. That doesn't mean that you have to provide all of the information for all of those options. So if you have a totalizer type meter, then you're able to provide your gallons or 1,000-gallon
I
readings.
thought you were
from that
just
meter.
after how much water I'm pumping, period. I'll give you that.
Right.
After I get the damn flow meter on.
Right.
Which I understand, and I've been told will double my electric rate because you're forcing water through a restricted device to measure it, and you're making my pump work extra long and drawing more energy. Now, that's a cost that is hidden in all this. It looks like the irrigator is bearing the burden for some bureaucratic dance we're doing.
Coming up on the 2 in the morning.
My next question is, throughout this, I keep hearing adequate water supply, and I keep hearing it out to 100 years. Who defines what is an adequate water supply, and who is going to project what that's going to be in 100 years? The way this is going, this whole area may be just a dry desert, and no adequate water supply is necessary other than to feed the lizards. Otherwise, or we can have a development like Tucson, and what sort of an adequate water supply is necessary for that? It's a very undefined term.
Sir, we are coming up on our 2 minutes here.
Okay,
I'll at least respond to that question, sir. Assured and adequate water supply is a big topic. We will, I understand the concern and confusion there. Genuinely, it took me probably 3 or more years of working closely with that team at the department to really wrap my head around what that group does.
have you got a definition?
So what assured or adequate water supply does is requires that new developments demonstrate 100 years of water supply for that development. And what I'll commit to doing is making sure that we have a more full explanation of assured and adequate water supply and how that will be applied to the Willcox AMA and how that will be implemented in the Willcox AMA in a future meeting. We'll make sure to have a more full explanation and discussion of that at a future meeting.
Thank you for your non-answer.
My name is Victoria Sky, and I live on Turkey Creek. I have for over the past 20 years. I'm a native. I'm here for one reason. I love this place. I listened to you. I didn't hear one word about protecting the environment. What's going on now is unsustainable. The wildlife is suffering. The local people are being driven out of their homes and their ranches. And it's been a takeover of all the ancient water underground. Turkey Creek, no water runs down to where it would here in the playa, the Cochise playa. I've lived on Turkey Creek for over 2 decades, and Turkey Creek will run over a half of a year, no longer. There is no water coming down from the Chiricahua Mountains. Not Turkey Creek, not Rock Creek, not 5 Mile Creek, not Bonita Creek. There's a reason for that. And it is very important that those things are being spoken about and addressed. The natural waterways coming down off the mountains in the sacred hoop of the Chiricahua Apache Mountains needs to be protected. Nature needs to be allowed to take its course. What is suffering because Turkey Creek isn't running? The lizards, the snakes, the frogs, the turtles, they're gone.
Is it 30-second warning?
Okay, 30 seconds to tell you that our focus needs to be to protect our waterways in the sacred hoop of the Chiricahua Mountains, Cochise's Mountains, Double Eagle's Head, Chiricahua Mountains, and the furthest southern mountain, Rough Rock. That needs to be our focus and your focus. And I haven't heard one single word about water protection. And our environment is being poisoned. Hello.
Thank you for your comment.
My name is Jesse Davis. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you taking our questions and our time. So I got one point of clarification. This young lady right here, you said something about an exemption for golf feedlots and dairies. Could you expand on that, please?
Not exemptions, it's more,
Different classifications.
yes, different,
Could you expand on that, please?
of course. There are different conservation requirements for feedlots, different conservation requirements for dairies, because they are so different. In the sense of, turf is different, a golf course is different than a feedlot. We're not going to lump them into one sum of the same requirement in conservation efforts. So there's a turf a lot in the initial AMAs, to be exact. There's a turf calculation of how much they receive in the allotments, for how much they can water their golf course. For dairies, there's an allotment based off of how many lactating cows they have on their feed or on their dairies. So there's different classifications based off of how many head they have, or how many golf courses, holes they have. So that's the difference.
Perhaps you should include ranches.
Yes,
You should,
feedlots are also.
because feedlots are not ranches. Feedlots are different than ranches. There's a lot of private ground out here about ready to affect in a very negative, dramatic way. As far as your management goal, I think you need to also measure all wells in this valley, because I am confident that there are many basins, not just two, certainly not one. My wells have not gone down in the Northwest Valley. So until you have data, you have an ineffective plan. And I'll ask one question and end with one comment. How do you qualify a well that is ready to pump, but has not done so prior to since 2019? Perhaps not since the 80s.
So it's a little bit complicated to answer without additional information. We do have provisions for folks who would be using water from a non-exempt well to apply for substantial capital investment. However, that substantial capital investment would have needed to be made within the appropriate 5-year period, between October 23rd, 2019 and October 23rd, 2024. Depending on the details of the well, if it's going to be used for a non-irrigation use, so it's not going to be irrigating 2 or more acres. If it won't be using 10 or more acre feet.
With all due respect, I know all that, what you're saying.
So
my question is, I'm 6th generation on the property that I live in since 1872. In 1983, we had a flood. We chose not to farm that ground because of it crushed us financially. We didn't want to farm it anymore, but there's still viable wells. So are you telling me right now that something that we decided to do in 1983, we're not going to be able to farm again?
the acres that would be eligible to be irrigated going forward would be those that were either irrigated in that 5-year period that I mentioned, or that can qualify for substantial capital investment. These are statutory requirements. These are not things that ADWR has flexibility on.
Okay, so just for clarification, if I have a casing with water in the hole and I can put a pump on it and irrigate that acreage that has historical data through the Farm Service Agency, where I have base acres and mapping that goes back to the 40s, are you seeing a problem with me being able to farm that in a couple of years?
By law, it would only be able to be irrigated if it had been irrigated in that 5-year period that I mentioned, or could qualify for substantial capital investment.
Damn, I'm not getting through.
I understand what the question is.
You
And
try to say yes or no.
The answer is based on what you're saying to me, where it doesn't sound like it has been irrigated in the last 5 years.
That's what I'm saying.
Were there,
1983.
and it doesn't sound like there has been any investments made. Those lands would not be able to be irrigated going forward.
I want to draw everybody's attention to a meeting they had last week. And it was to,
Sir, I apologize, but
my final comment. She spoke just as much as I did. My final comment is you had a meeting last week, public meeting, in regards to AMAs in Phoenix and one other, I can't recall the name, but the title, everyone, was called Ag to Urban.
Thank you for your comment.
My name's Young Mayberry. I'm from St. David. I'm sure everybody in here will recall in 2022, there was a proposition on the ballot as to whether or not y'all wanted an AMA. It was rejected. It was rejected by the Willcox people. And by stroke of luck, if you will, the Douglas one was accepted because of a lot of non-agricultural people out of Douglas, out of Bisbee. I'm concerned in the St. David area, on the San Pedro area, that we're going to be next in line for a top-down dictated AMA. Not interested in that. I served 28 years in the Air Force as an officer, combating socialism against the Union, the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. What we have here in Arizona right now, through the 1980 law, is a socialist program. Because we know in ARS 45-141, it says that all waters from all sources belong to the public and are subject to appropriation. That's the short version. In effect, if we don't have control of our water, we don't have control of our land. And that is a socialist dream, to have the government control the land. And that's what's going on here. You folks come down from Phoenix and try to tell us here in Cochise County how we're going to operate as far as water goes, after we already, or the people here anyway, already rejected an AMA. San Pedro's next. San Simon is probably next. I think we need to wake up, folks, that we're dealing with a socialist program right here, and we need to put a stop to it. Now, these are fine folks, nice people, I'm sure. But President Reagan said, the most terrifying words in the American English language are, we're from the government and we're here to help. We've heard these people from the government and how they're helping us. Why don't we help ourselves? If we want to put something together, don't you think we have enough brain power to do it? Or do we have to have these young kids come down and tell us how to do it? We're ranchers, we're farmers, we're longtime residents. I'm 70 years old, born and raised in Cochise County. I think I know a little bit more about what's going on in our county and how we should do it
30-second warning, sir.
than these folks do. Anyway, watch out for socialism. It spreads. Look at Venezuela. Do we want to be Venezuela? I don't. And I'm not willing to let it happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Mike Ware. I was born in Willcox, Arizona. I will die here in Willcox, Arizona. I'm a rancher, 5th generation. We've seen the water woes go. When Spreckles Sugars was out in the Kansas settlement, they run tons of tailwater on the ranch we had down there. They thought they were drying up, so they moved on. On comes another man, and then another man, and now the dairy. This has been going on longer than you people even been alive. I look at all of you, and I reiterate what the man just said there. You're trying to tell us how to live our lives by your socialistic ideas. We voted on this. We voted it down. And then you come along with a backhand deal and tell your vote means nothing. That's exactly what you all are doing. It's telling us our vote means nothing. And this is totally wrong. When you turn around and look at the lady talking about the Chiricahuas, there's no snow melt on the Chiricahuas right now. I live off the Chiricahua slopes near Pinery Creek. There's been no runoff for years, but when we do get a recharge, we get a fast recharge. The same in the Bonita area up there. When we get a recharge, it's a fast recharge, and it's rebuilt real quick. In anticipation of this AMA, I put in and drilled a non-exempt well. Now you're telling me I cannot use that non-exempt well. So is that not a substantial investment in my land that you are taking from me as a takings? I believe it is. And I believe you people are doing it because you want to move this water to where the people are that have the votes. Yeah, our little rural county doesn't carry the votes like your urban counties do, Maricopa, Pinal, Pima, all of those. My last question is, how do I quantify my well? Substantial investment?
So to apply for substantial capital investment, you would apply for an irrigation grandfather right with that SCI attachment. We have some applications over there as well as on our website. And when you apply for that, you would just include whatever receipts you have for the improvements that you made upon your property that apply to your land.
So I like to save my water. I did it as an investment. I like to put money in the bank. Water's money in the bank, folks. It is. And here you are telling me now that I can't cash in on my monies. We drilled 2 non-exempt wells in anticipation of this because normally when the government gets their mind to do something, they do it. And we can bark all day long and talk as much as we want and nothing changes because they come down with a heavy hand at the top, governor, and then your Department of Water Resources director. That is pretty low and that's pretty cutthroat. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Too tall for that. Hi, I'm James Schmidt. I live in Dragoon. I was with the USDA for 10 years here, and I know most of the ranchers and farmers in this county. No one in this room wastes water, not a single one of them. And yet your AMA is implying that they do. One of the questions I have, because a lot of it's been covered by some really good speakers here, is that, yes, the dairy might be in a different class. They use 35 billion gallons of water a year. The power plant, 1.6 million gallons a day that evaporates into the air. And you're telling these people that they can't use water when two of them use more water than all of you combined, and you're not regulating. I don't see any regulation here. I don't see any regulation there. You know what I did see though? Did everybody see up there that they want to preserve the water?
Sir, could you please speak into the mic? Thank you.
Did everyone see up there? All right. They want to preserve water for future use for non-agriculture. You see that line? How can you say that? How can you sit here and say that to a county that was created out of agriculture? That's why this county is successful. 40% of this county is private. This is a real estate deal. You want the real estate because non-agriculture pays more taxes than the agricultural people. I couldn't find anywhere in the statutes in all of Arizona that the state owns the water, because you don't. You don't own it. The AMA is illegal basically because you're trying to control something you do not own. You don't have any control over it. The other significant problem I have is your map. Your map is vague. How do I know if I'm on the border of your squiggly lines, who I don't know who created in the first place? How do I know I'm in it or I'm on the outside of it? I have ranchers who can't tell whether they're in it or not. How do we get something detailed? Would you answer that for me?
I can answer that. So on our website, and we can make sure we provide a link to this, we do have interactive GIS type maps. So kind of, if you imagine like Google Maps where you can zoom in on it, we have GIS maps with those boundaries on it. So you can zoom in as far as you want to be able to see more precisely the locations of those boundaries.
I did that, and it still didn't show me what I wanted to know because the line's fairly wide in there. Does it go down? I'll make this up. Does it go down 191 on both sides or just down the middle? It's hard to tell. So people don't know where they stand. So overall, this state, this county has done just fine. There are heavy users in this county that you are intentionally not regulating, and that's absolutely wrong. And I do not know in a democracy where any politician can overturn a citizen's legal vote. And that's already been said once, but it angers me that you think you can come in and we had a legal vote here and you didn't like the results, so you're going to overturn it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Hello. My name's John Fleischman. I moved here to Cochise County 21 years ago upon completion of a 25-year Coast Guard career. I retired as a warrant officer, chief warrant officer in the Coast Guard. Came here to make my home. And I watched, since then, I've noticed that, for a long time, there was no water issue. There appeared to be no water issue until large out-of-state commercial interests came in and started sucking out as much water as they could possibly draw. Now, this hurts everybody in the county. If you want to have generational farming to continue, it requires water regulation. Now, you say, well, let the people regulate it. Well, you've had all kind of time to do that, and it hasn't occurred. So and I very much support the AMA because it wasn't getting done. It was going to be if the free-for-all would continue, and whoever has the biggest pumps, the deepest wells, was going to take the water. The dairy came in, and when they came in, they asked if the aquifer would support 30 years of their operation. They don't care if it leaves nothing at the end of 30 years. They don't care. They don't live here. They're not from here. They don't. And there's a thing that says I heard something recently that said, arguments are arguments. Give me data. Data will solve arguments. The data is we have subsidence, dropping wells, dangerous conditions that have brought us to where we are today. And another thing says the proof is in the pudding, you might say, which is it's obvious through the subsidence, the fissures, everyone losing their wells, that something must be done. And so I'm just up here today to support the AMA. And like it or not, it's an agricultural valley, but there are many private citizens moving in. I know I'm one of them. There are lots of them. We all have to work together so that the generations can have water in perpetuity. And I have one question. As a private well, I'm not clear on this, do I need to register my well? So, okay.
So all wells in the state are required to be registered with the state. That registration number will be a 55 number, so it'll be 55 dash and then 6 more digits. That just registers the well as being owned by you. Let's say DWR know that that well exists. That doesn't mean that that well is regulated. The well is non-exempt and required to report only if it is greater than 35 gallons per minute, is being used to irrigate 2 or more acres, or is using 10 or more acre feet for a non-irrigation use. So there are a lot of small exempt wells that are smaller than 35 gallons a minute, aren't using 10 or more acre feet, aren't irrigating 2 or more acres, that aren't going to be subject to the reporting requirements, conservation requirements, and that sort of thing. And won't have to apply for a grandfathered right.
So mine should have been registered when I got a well permit, correct?
Correct. That
Okay.
would have provided your 55
Okay.
number. That's
So
correct.
therefore, so I don't have to do anything more.
Assuming it's an exempt well,
It's an-
then
it's-
you don't have to do anything more.
It's an exempt well.
Perfect.
Okay. But like I said, just to reiterate, very much in favor of the AMA. I don't see it as a socialist thing. I see it as something to where the government came in to say, we are going to, since
So
to
we're
provide the
kind
good for the everyone, for the good of all. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, young ladies and gentlemen, for coming to Willcox. I wish you would have brought the governor with us because we could have given her some wine and a glass of milk and a good steak. I'm a country girl and I'm proud of it. I was the energy management specialist and irrigation specialist for 35 years at Sulphur Springs Electric. We're in a 30-year drought. The drought that we're having with no snow and no rain and stuff is not coming from problems down underneath. Yeah, there's some fissures and everything. There's also been some seismic activity, some underground shakes over by San Simon. There's lots of things going on. The agriculture is the economic engine of Willcox. We've got John Deere tractors and every business in Willcox, even the doctor's offices and the lawyer's offices, are based on agriculture. That's the economic engine. Maybe you should get in touch with the Department of Agriculture because farmers and ranchers put $34 billion into the Arizona economy. That's our lifestyle. We want to keep the lifestyle. There's no better steward of the land than a farmer or rancher. So tell the governor we'd like to have her come and we'd fix her a steak and a glass of wine.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Desiree Girth. I have a vineyard here in Willcox, one of the lowest water use crops. My question is just about for the substantial capital investment. What is that date specific in within that 5 years that you've been irrigating? Or can you have, if you're showing your receipts for all of your investment be before that time?
So yes, it is still date specific to that same time range of October 23rd, 2019 to the October 23rd, 2024.
What I might clarify there is if you've been irrigating in that time period, then you can apply kind of for a regular grandfathered right. But if there is additional land that you haven't irrigated, then you can also apply for substantial capital investment. So in the example of Douglas, we've seen applications that were 100% applications for substantial capital investment where no land had been irrigated. We also saw some that were a mix where some land had been irrigated, but they were requesting additional land be considered for substantial capital investment. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense. Yes, thank you. One more question, just about enforcement. I've heard sort of some rumors from neighbors of ours in other counties of when these things have gone in place where someone is coming out, and I'm not sure who that would be, maybe you can answer, but who is checking on the meters and maybe are they checking on crops? Are they pulling up people's crops if they're not kind of following the guidelines? How would that work?
So ADWR does have statutory enforcement authority. We do have a compliance and enforcement team that actively monitors irrigable acres, that type of thing throughout the AMA. As AMAs start getting established, or as an AMA gets further along in the establishment process, and we start getting things like reported water use, we have GIS or satellite imagery that we can use to kind of check certain parameters. So if we say we get a report from someone with 100 acres who says they used 10 acre-feet of water, but we can see on the satellite that they irrigated all 100 of their acres, we're going to know to maybe look into that report, to maybe do an inspection on that well, that type of thing. So we do have methods to kind of
a task
proof and
force or someone who actually would make visits.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm Kathy Collins. I have a couple of questions. The management plan at arizonawater.gov, you said January 31st for the comments or ideas. That's this year. That's like in 2 weeks. Okay. So you also used a
That's for comments on the proposed goal that we have
right.
today.
You also used like a goal template to figure out the goal. Is that somewhere online? Can we see that? Because I looked on Willcox AMA and it's not
We'll
there.
be posting this presentation.
So it'll be there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
And then
Sorry, what I'll add about the comments that are, we have a deadline in a couple weeks. That's really an initial deadline. What we're trying to do is collect some initial feedback from folks down here, and then we'll come back and have another meeting, discuss the feedback we've gotten, and see if we can have additional conversation about it at that time. It won't be necessarily the end of the process or the end of the discussion.
okay. So will all of our meetings be like this, just an open meeting, or will there be a committee formed at some time?
we will eventually have a GUAC formed, which is a council board, which is a governor appointed board.
Eventually.
Eventually, we are in the process of creating applications and accepting applications.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. By statute, there is a groundwater users advisory council in each active management area. That's what GUAC stands for. Those members on the GUAC are appointed by the governor. And so folks can apply through the boards and commissions website.
Okay, I know this, but is there a deadline for that to be set up? Because right now,
There is not.
all these things are being created by maybe you guys, maybe ADW, or I don't know who's creating them, but it's not us. And I think it would be more effective if you didn't come here and tell us, well, this is the thing, so give us ideas. I mean, I think it would work better if there were actually a committee that had representatives from that we knew who to contact and talk to them about it, and you take it to your meeting.
There is not a deadline for folks to apply to boards and commissions. I just checked a few minutes ago whether that application was up on boards and commissions website, and it is not. So I will follow up with them once I get back to the office tomorrow and make sure that they make that application available. What I will say is that once the GUAC is appointed by the governor's office, then we would work closely with them and make sure we are getting additional feedback from those members. However, we also want to make sure that we have broader conversations with folks in the community. The GUACs are certainly helpful, can certainly talk with more folks in the community, are certainly more in touch with the local conditions here. But we want to make sure that we're also making these discussions available to as broad of a stakeholder group as we can.
Which is fine, but do we really, we can tell you over and over again that we don't want an AMA, but that doesn't matter. We need to get the AMA working and have it working correctly so we know what we're doing. You have May 31st or March 31st to have our meters on, but nothing's set up yet. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have everything's going, we're going, and we don't have anything set up yet.
Sure. And I definitely understand the frustration. We ask for patience. It takes time to get those things set up, and there are statutory timelines and deadlines there.
My name is Sam Pillsbury. I've been growing grapes and making wine in Kansas Settlement since 2000. One of the critical things for me to know economically is what is the date by which we will know that our grandfathered rights and whatever other rights we're looking for will be allowed and certified.
Good question. So the application deadline is April 8th, 2026. After that, statutorily, we have to post a registry of all applications that we've received on our website with all of the personal details redacted. And that gives folks in the basin a chance to look at who has applied. And maybe of some factual issues with some applications, and it gives people the opportunity to object to those applications. After that, evidence is heard and decisions are made in terms of that. But after that 180-day objection period, that's when grandfathered rights can be issued.
What date would that be? Any good at math?
The end of October of
Yeah,
26.
towards the end of
October
October
26th.
of 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it's a long time. It's gonna affect my business for sure. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Howdy, I'm Scott Zickafus. I'm a resident of Willcox. I'm Scott Zickafus. I'm a resident of Willcox. Haven't been here all that long. But one of the things that in this process that I haven't seen yet, heard anybody talking about yet is cost. Per acre foot, I don't know how that would go. Haven't heard anything about it. I imagine enforcement would be largely based on exceeding some baseline value, which is what you're trying to get with the meters going in later this year. Is trying to get some idea of baseline. I don't know where you're gonna see reductions with what's going on. I mean, the dairy's not gonna reduce anything because they don't draw any more than what they need. The power plant's not gonna change what they do because they draw what they need. They're not drawing excess water. Neither any of these ranchers or anybody else. It's kind of nonsensical in the scheme of things, unless you're going to start paying for somebody's land, because effectively you're taking their land from them. That's all I got.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm Jim Graham. My wife and I farm wine grapes and pistachios out by Cochise. I think one of the things that those of us in specialty crops in particular are concerned about is how quickly we can get substantial capital investment designation. You might understand that if we were going to expand our vineyard and we had grapevines ordered, you order them a year in advance so that you've got them, you lay out your irrigation, you've done all this. We understand that it probably will qualify for substantial investment, but how quickly will those applications be approved? It's pretty important to those of us in the vineyard business in particular.
So I kind of mentioned before, once the application deadline passes, we have that 180-day objection period. So near like mid to late October is when rights would be issued of 2026.
We're talking about 2 years. So if people have, I'm sorry, you understand my question?
I understand the question and I understand the concern. These timelines that Casey and Madison have talked about, the 15 months after the establishment of the AMA for the application deadline, plus an additional 6 months for objections, those are laid out in state law. ADWR does not have authority to issue any grandfathered rights prior to those processes playing out. We have to follow the timelines laid out in state law.
Hi, my name's Kurt. Haven't been here in the area a long time. I bought some property, about 60 acres about 4 years ago. And the reason I bought it was because it had an irrigation well on it. That 60 acres has a steel pipeline in it, and the entire 60 acres was irrigated. Okay, so I understand the state's got a timeline, but I didn't know anything about the state's timeline. My timeline was different. I haven't done anything other than purchase the property. I've erected a barn. I haven't cleared land yet, but my intent was always to grow some grass and run a few cows. So I can't show that thing's been irrigated in the last 5 years. I can show you that I bought the property. Is that considered a substantial capital investment? I'm sorry my timeline wasn't conducive to what you guys are doing, but I've got 60 acres that was irrigated at one time. I'd like to irrigate it again.
So SCI is very fact specific. So if you believe as though your investment and purchase of your land is something that would qualify as capital investment, we definitely welcome you to apply and attest that form.
But it's not what it's not what I believe. It's what you believe that counts, because I can believe anything I want to. And unless you believe and you trust me that I say I bought that land, because I can show you Google Earth pictures where it was irrigated. I can show you the crop rows. I can tell you that, but unless you believe it, I'm screwed, right?
So typically with substantial capital investment applications, and obviously I can't speak to your specific case or give you advice here, but in general with substantial capital investment applications, ADWR does not consider the purchase price of land as a part of the investment. The investment has to be toward bringing the land into irrigation. Now, if you can demonstrate that a differential, that some premium was paid for that land because it had existing irrigation infrastructure, then we can consider that differential, that premium that was paid, as a part of substantial capital investment.
So you're talking about a differential. I'm talking about a go, no-go situation. When I bought the land, I wouldn't have bought it, period. So every nickel that I put into this place is because that had that well on it and it had been irrigated, and my intent was to irrigate it. It doesn't sound like we have the same meeting of the minds as to what cost and substantial capital investment is. And that's what I'm trying to get understood.
For maintenance, sir.
Excuse me? I'm hard of hearing, so you got to yell at me.
Oh, you have 30 seconds remaining.
I'm trying to get my question clearly understood. So I need to know whether I need to move out of this area or do whatever I need to do.
And I can't tell you
So
about your specific application.
Who do I call so that I can get these answers and know what to do?
We cannot give recommendations. We cannot make determinations on substantial capital investment absent.
Who can?
This goes through ADWR's process.
Okay, so who do I call?
ADWR cannot make determinations on substantial capital investment applications outside of our application process. It has to go through the process. Wow. And I understand that's not the answer you wanted, but it's the only answer.
I'm just trying to, and I agree with these other folks here, is that this thing was voted down 2 years ago and the state comes in and says, oh, we don't care what y'all think. We don't care that you come down here and you invest your life and you move here on purpose because of this stuff. We don't care about anything like that. And not only do we not care, we're not going to help you out of the situation that we have intentionally put you in. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. I would just like to say we do appreciate the frustration. We appreciate that.
Because you would do something.
I'm going to keep speaking. We appreciate that this is a lot of information. We appreciate that this is a big change, and for these staff, for the department, the AMA exists today, and our statutory obligation is to implement the laws and the structures of the AMA as written. We're not here to debate the AMA's existence or whether or not it should exist. From this point, it exists, and our role is to implement it. There are some things that are laid out in state statute that we simply can't have flexibility with, and I understand that that's frustrating. And we also can't have flexibility with those things because we have a statutory legal obligation to implement those things.
Hi, my name is Vicki Sudmarsko, and I'm a real estate broker here in Cochise and Graham County. Now, I just want to say a few things, especially for what he said and what you commented on. When land is purchased here with an irrigation well on it, we do give it more value. So for you to go ahead and say that you're not going to include that in their application, that's wrong.
So
Okay?
to clarify
Let me
that,
finish.
I
Okay?
would like to say what I said is that if there is a premium paid for something like an irrigation well on that land, we can consider that premium as a part of
And
substantial.
how are you going to judge what that premium is?
That burden is on the side of the applicant. The applicant
Right.
needs to
So
demonstrate
again,
that.
so he can come and ask me for a letter. By all means, come get me. I'm right down the street. And I'll write him a letter to show you that raw vacant land with nothing on it is a whole lot less than a piece of property with an irrigation well on it. So those are things that you need to be considerate of. And then the other thing, like most of these other people, you should have that board in place already, because you're going to set up all these rules and regulations and then come back and say, oh, all right, here's a board, now we're going to go ahead and change things. That's not helping these vineyards. They're not helping the dairy. It's not helping anybody. We don't want to blame the dairy for all this problems that we're having. But the thing is, first of all, in the last meeting, you talked about that you've been watching the groundwaters and that there was issues. You have all these reports and everything else. It is your fault that so many wells had gone in that is affecting some of these residential properties. The thing is, it should not be in an AMA. You guys should have did your job when these applications were going in for these wells being drilled. So again, they voted on it. It should be no, and we need to do something to get you out of here.
My name is Jacques van der Lely. I'm living here for more than 30 years. I think we got a prime example of destroying capital. The property that is affected is going to be worth nothing. I don't know if we can keep open the hospital, the fire department, and the schools, because the property tax income is going to go down. The value of the land is going to drop probably 80%. I tell you, at least 3/4. Now, a lot of people here have a well they don't use. And I don't care if that well is 70 years old or 7 years old or 7 days. That's a capital investment. Each well, if you have to drill it now, is worth $200,000 at least. That's a capital investment. So I think you're on the wrong path. We're dealing here with land, with a well, and if the well is never used, it's capital destroying. And by the way, this whole deal is an election interference. I tell that again, I tell it last time. This is election interference. We had a clear no of way over 60%. And I think we're still a republic and we vote on things. But this is communism. Thank you.
My name is Ruth Graham. My question is, if we have irrigated land that is going to be sold before October of 2026, we would have no guarantee to our buyer that they would be approved to use that irrigated land. Are we just going to be held up for 2 years?
So on our applications, we actually have a question where we ask if you've owned that parcel of land within that 5-year time span. And if not, you communicate with the person who, would purchase that land and receive those records proving that irrigation happened, basically.
It's not what she's saying. What she's saying is that the fact is that if she wants to go ahead and sell her property, put a premium price on it because of what she has there now, she can't guarantee that value in 2 years because you might go ahead and not approve her application or the new person's application. So again, you're affecting their livelihood and affecting the property to be sold.
ADWR can't provide legal advice. I would encourage, if you have concerns about your specific situation, to consult an attorney. However, ma'am, let me finish.
The thing is you just
However, What I can say is that all of these do have to go through the application process. The application process is laid out in statute and we can't vary from that. We do have a process to allow pending application to follow the change of ownership and allow that application to be transferred to a new owner, but we can't make a determination on a specific application outside of that application process.
So we would need to hire an attorney and we would need to have this sale be contingent on the fact that it might be approved?
She's not going to answer that. Yeah.
The best we can do is reiterate that all of the applications have to go through that application process. I'm not going to be able to give you an answer on your specific situation, on your specific application outside of that application process.
So we wouldn't know until October of 2026.
That's when we will start issuing grandfathered rights. That's correct.
Start issuing.
Yep.
So that's not a definite date either?
It would depend on the facts of each application.
How long do you think it would take to go through all of the applications?
We haven't begun receiving, we have our applications available, but I don't believe we've received any yet, so I can't say how many we'll receive and how long that would take.
But I'm just saying, okay, October of 2026 would be the start of it, and it could go on for some period of time after that before they're approved?
So speaking generally, simple applications where there was clear evidence of historic irrigation would be relatively quick for us to process and get out the door. It would need to follow that application process and would have to go through that process. I can't necessarily speak to the facts of a specific application. For things that include a lot of complexity, where there may be questions about whether land was actually irrigated, or where there might not be a totally clear determination on substantial capital investment or other things like that, where there might be more legal questions, those types of applications that are more complex are going to take longer. But ones where there is clear evidence of irrigation should be some of the first that would go out the door.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Cheryl Knott. I live in the Pierce area, and I've been there about 22 years now. And I just want to acknowledge that before the AMA, ADWR had no legal basis to keep the big growers out of this area. There was nothing you all could have done to keep Riverview out, for example. So one of the good things about the AMA now is that another Riverview cannot come in. Another tri-nut grower from out of California cannot come in. That's a good thing. But I want to say that the management goal needs to, in some way, recognize that there is a big difference between Riverview and every other irrigation user, groundwater user in this AMA. And I think I was really encouraged when you said that in Douglas AMA, you're working on kind of a tier system. Riverview is in a class by itself. There is that tier, and then there could be other tiers, but there's everybody else, right? So I think the draft needs to be revised to recognize this huge disparity and to build some fairness in as a principle. How groundwater is going to be managed has to be fair to everyone. And that means acknowledging that there is a user who is taking way more out of the aquifer than is good for the health of the aquifer and for the health of our entire area. So thank you.
My name is Lisa Glenn, and I have lived here in the basin for 57 years with my husband. So much of what has been said here tonight is absolutely true. For generations, ranchers, small farmers, residents, business, city have all coexisted quite well here. We have been a community that was thoughtful, we were concerned for each other, and we tried to do what was right for the community. We have gotten in this situation that we are in today, an unsustainable situation, not through any much fault of our own. At one time, the Cochise County supervisors had zoning on industrialized dairies and dairy feedlots. They had denied Faria Dairy an exemption to expand onto land that was zoned for small agriculture. Faria appealed to the Arizona Appeals Court in 2009, where it was also denied. And then in 2011, Senate Bill 1341, sponsored by then Senator Frank Antonori, passed by Republican majority, including David Gowan, Gail Griffin, Peggy Judd, and David Stevens, and signed into law on April 14th, 2011 by the Governor Jan Brewer. This bill made an exception to the zoning ordinance law. It took away our own county's authority to zone specifically dairies and dairy feedlots. And thus, it also took away our local control of how much groundwater could be pumped by dairies and dairy feedlots. Riverview bought out Faria Dairy in 2014 for $38 million plus in cash. Since that time, we have all been talking about local control. We have put forth bills at the legislature,
You've got
most
30
never
seconds
even
left,
being
miss.
heard. And we have sent people to the legislature to try to get something done all the time, not knowing that we had absolutely no local control over industrialized ag. This whole unsustainable situation in our basin is due to scale, industrialized scale. And that is what we have to address. Cheryl Knott is absolutely right that it's the big players who have been allowed to come in and suck our aquifer down by hundreds of feet. Okay, it is the big players who need to draw down the most. But we need to understand how we got here. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Good afternoon. My name's Brian Gilson. I own a small vineyard in this valley. My family's originally from Idaho, where it's even drier than here. I have a couple of questions. I've been sitting here patiently. There are two very prominent water users in this valley. The first of which is very, very locally known as the dairy. Another one's the power plant, as Mr. Schmidt here has indicated earlier. Question I have, the first one is this. What regulations are on these commercial users, and are they different from everybody else in this valley? And if they are, who makes that call? Because I've seen a flurry of activity in this valley concerning well drilling, and it's by very specific groups. It's not the people that bought a well in a property that had been farmed for 50 years. It's not the ranchers here for the third or fifth generation. It's a new infrastructure coming in that is drilling down to 1,500 feet with big wells, 24 inches, and draining this. So is it a different playing field? That's question number one for those users. Dairy and power plants specifically.
So there are different types of grandfathered rights for irrigation users or non-irrigation users. So the industrial type users would be classified under non-irrigation. For someone who is using water for a non-irrigation use in the 5 years prior to the AMA being established, they can apply for what's called a Type 2 non-irrigation right, which, if approved, would grant a grandfathered groundwater right for a non-irrigation use equal to the highest use in the 5 years prior to the AMA being established.
Okay, that.
There's more to that.
For that. Yes.
In addition to that, there are also conservation requirements written into management plans for those large users. Like Madison talked about, those management plans can be customized to a specific area. So I can't say exactly what those conservation requirements are going to be for Willcox, because as we work through this process, we'll have additional meetings to talk about those requirements and develop those together. In other AMAs, we do have specific conservation requirements for power plants, requirements that they meet certain efficiency standards. We have specific conservation requirements for dairies, requiring that they meet, again, certain efficiency standards and water use per head of cattle standards, that type of thing. So while I can't say necessarily what those will be for here because they haven't been developed yet, those types of things are very common in the other AMAs and do work to increase conservation and efficiency at those types of facilities.
Okay, and I hope this doesn't go against my time. Her answer was longer than my question, sir. The second aspect of it is this. The dairy controls feedlots. I call them feedlots because they don't milk that many cows. But with respect to that, they also control thousands of acres in this valley. Are these two separate licenses, and are they distinguishable with respect to that?
Yes. So for the acres that are associated with feedlots or dairies, those would be classified as a non-irrigation use, where it's the physical dairy, where it's stalls and the milking equipment and that kind of thing. That would be classified as a non-irrigation use. And those would be under that type 2 type of grandfathered right that I talked about, and also the requirements in the industrial section of a management plan that would be developed. For the irrigated land, that's going to be under an irrigation grandfathered right.
They're in the same boat as we all are.
And those things would be defined separately. Irrigation specifically defined by the physical acres where that irrigation is occurring.
Third question, if I may, and you're on a home run here. With respect to that particular aspect, given the fact that these commercial, and I view them as commercial users such as the dairy, are in this valley, are they being given any special consideration? Because they're the primary water user here, at least where I'm at. Given that fact, are they looking at grandfathering what they are existing as being pumped? Or are they being told, tone it down, reduce your acreage? Because I see that where this whole AMA is going, tone down your water usage, reduce your acreage, get a more sustainable crop, if I can put it that way, and don't draw from the aquifer. So the question really comes down to this. As the biggest water user in this valley, is the dairy being asked to provide a management plan to reduce their pumping capacity right now to allow for a reduction of the drawdown of this aquifer? Because what I'm hearing is that they're going to be grandfathered in with exactly the same pumping rights as they have today.
We got about 30
which
seconds
is a
left.
real problem in this valley. That and the other commercial users. I don't need to specify just a dairy.
Sorry, I'm just making a note. So I'm trying to think of how precisely to answer the question. It was long.
My
There's-
time's up, or I'd
there's-
help.
Yes, and I apologize that I also took some of your time, so I appreciate you being patient with me. So under the grandfathered rights definitions, so the type 2 I talked about, the irrigation grandfathered right, those things are very defined in state law. So everyone is treated the same for those pieces. For the management plan requirements, there is more opportunity for customization. We would not target specific requirements at specific users because we want to make sure that those requirements are equitable. But something we have done in other management plans is require certain categories of users to submit a site-specific conservation plan, for example. So that is certainly something we could consider as a part of industrial water use requirements for the Willcox management plan.
Don't yell at me. I know that I've probably exceeded, but here's the bottom line on this. The dairy and other commercial type users, such as the dairy or tree farms, would get their current grandfathered rights on the same basis as we do, correct?
By state law, those things are defined and we would process those according to state law.
Same as us.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to note the time. We are about 5 minutes before our end time. I am going to let you speak, Steve. I just want to note if anyone else is wanting to speak, we'll want to burn through these last few comments quickly.
Hi, my name's Steve Kissel. I'm a resident in the Pierce, Arizona area, southern part of the basin. Been living here 25 years, domestic well user. I want to just recognize that I think we have probably an unprecedented situation here with the Willcox Basin in terms of the level of the overdraft. I know some of the initial AMAs when they were established, certainly the overdraft wasn't anywhere near what we're at today. And also want to recognize, and I think that requires maybe some recognition in the goal of that draft and how we might need to respond given the level. I know some folks in the room have said their wells have not gone dry, or have not, their water levels have not gone dry, but have gone not declined significantly. But in very widespread parts of the basin, they have declined significantly. And kind of in piggybacking on some of the comments of the previous few folks regarding some of the larger users, some of the biggest declines, in fact, most of the biggest declines are in very concentrated areas. Where there's very concentrated farming irrigation, upwards of 55 to 60 center pivots within a 5-mile area in the Sun Zone area, for example, in Turkey Creek, in the Kansas Settlement area, similar situation. And then also a little bit over in the Pierce Sun Sites area, and then an area in the northern part of the basin. Could a management plan look at and I know some folks are going to be affected more. There's potentially more consequences for those folks who particularly have the not as deep wells, particularly the domestic users in those areas. Would there be a way to recognize that in the management plan and have the in the management goal, and have it be recognized that you might have a differential requirements as well as objective for some of these areas that are depleting much more quickly? Because, asking somebody that's up in an area that's not depleting very quickly.
We've got about 30 more seconds.
Okay. To reduce theirs as much, it doesn't seem to be necessarily fair or going to be as effective asking someone to reduce in an area that's not very densely being farmed or being irrigated and affecting a lot of other homeowners and land users as it is in those areas where it's very concentrated. So that's something to think about. The other question I would have or comment would be, I think you owe it to all of us to define the word feasible in the second half of the management goal there.
Sir.
Okay, and then also to at least provide some balance in when you say economic growth, because
Sir, that's your time.
all right, thank you.
If you have any written comments, we'd be
Yeah,
happy
I'll
to take
submit
those
some,
via
yeah,
email.
thanks.
Appreciate that. Before we have you, I do have one person online with a raised hand, and then I'll get to you after that person. So we have Carlos online. Carlos, I will go ahead and unmute you, and you can, maybe I won't. Oops, uh-oh. Thought I was able to unmute people. It's not working. I might need help, Dennis. Sorry. Zach, I'm clicking it, I swear. I just clicked on the microphone thing for unmuting us and it's not working.
Oh,
Okay, whoops. Did it work?
no, it didn't work.
Okay. Sorry about that. For our online Carlos person, we will come back to you in a moment once I figure out how to unmute you. But for now, I will let our in-person commenter go.
Good evening. This is Caleb Miniger. I'm just a local resident with a couple of acres, and I just was wondering on the capital investment side, I've been working for like the last 5 years trying to get my little farm going. But if I don't have a paper that says I put X amount of time into my property, how do I prove that I have capital investment? Do I just submit my grocery bills, or how do I prove that, my blood and sweat I've, been putting into it the last 5 years is a capital investment? Is there any thought on that?
Yes. So any like hours spent definitely count, especially if you can get some kind of like quote for somebody if you were the one doing the work. Otherwise, like any kind of receipts that you have for any kind of investments into your property definitely will count towards that.
So like if I would get an alternative quote from somebody saying that like this is what this would have cost to do, that would qualify even though I did it all myself.
That's definitely something that we take into consideration. Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
And now we can go ahead and get to our online comment with Carlos. Give me a second, Carlos. I'm going to take you off of mute here in a second.
Are you able to unmute yourself, Carlos?
Hey, Carlos, if you are on the chat, you can accept the request to unmute yourself, sir.
All right. We are after 6 o'clock with Carlos not unmuting, and I'm not seeing any additional comments there. We are going to go ahead and wrap up our meeting today. We are happy to accept any additional written comments via our email address. We'll be posting the slides and additional information on our website, and there are cards at the table by the door with our contact information where you can reach us. We really do appreciate everyone being here tonight and participating. We appreciate all the questions, and we look forward to continuing to work with you all. Thank you.